Okay, welcome everybody to this afternoon's panel debate, Regenerative Agricultural Focus. So before we kick off and before I introduce our panelists, I'm going to hit you with a few slightly depressing statistics about the state of where we are. I'm sure you've heard many of these before, but let's just get ourselves in the right mood. The fashion industry is responsible for 10% of global CO2 emissions currently, and around 20% of wastewater discharge globally. So the industry is using 92 billion cubic meters of water per year, and that's enough to provide drinking water for a country approximately the size of Denmark. From an agricultural standpoint, looking at agricultural fibres, cotton uses only 2.4% of land area. Yet, it consumes 10% of all insecticides. And these chemicals are responsible for the poisoning and deaths of over 500 people per day globally. But it's not all bad news. Sustainable textiles are on the move. They're expected to grow by nearly 8% from 2022 to 2027. So there are solutions out there. Just to introduce myself briefly before we introduce the panel, my name's Lee Holdstock, and I work for Soil Association Certification Limited, and this afternoon I'm really pleased to be part of this discussion exploring the important connection, I think, between agriculture and fabrics. Given the significance of the global challenges that we face, as I've just outlined, the contribution better fashion and textiles can make in addressing these challenges, and my own modest contribution as part of one of the original team that founded GOTS makes me particularly interested in this conversation this afternoon, hearing about the contribution that regenerative approaches are making to the world of sustainable and ethical fabrics. So on to our panel in just a moment, but before we do, I just want to reassure you that there is going to be an opportunity for questions from the audience in a while. So towards the end of the session, we will, I believe, have a roving mic, and we'll make sure there's time for you to ask questions. And when you do, please do tell us, and I'll remind you later, but do tell us who you are, where you're from, before you ask your question. Right, so without further ado, let's begin. And I'm going to ask each of our panelists in turn to just spend 1 minute introducing themselves. So I want to know from each of you who you are, which business you're from, or organisation, and very quickly, why specifically you got involved in sustainable fabrics or textiles. So I'm going to start with you, Ed.
Amazing. Hey everyone, my name is Edward Hill. I'm one of the founders and CSO at Moderator. We are a fashion tech company supporting brands source amazing regenerative cotton from smallholder farmers in India. We work with around 5,000 farmers across kind of the central and western states. And the kind of things that's special about Moderator is our cotton comes with a lot of data. So working within regenerative, we really need to be able to prove the outcomes we're achieving. So we have a lot of environmental, social, and biodiversity-based data.
Thank you. Han.
Hey, I'm Philippe. I'm one of the co-founders of Climate Farmers. I have nothing to do with the fashion industry, as you probably see on my outfit. So this is my second fashion event after the Global Fashion Summit last year. And I have a lot to do with farming, though. So we're supporting farmers across Western Europe in the transition to regenerative agriculture. We work with several thousand farmers there together. And that is mostly in the food industry, because most fashion is not being sourced in Europe. But we're now starting to also talk to some fashion brands. And I will definitely be talking a lot about the issues in our agricultural system in general.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Philippe. And Eddie.
Well, thank you. Well, my name is Ajalcriña. I'm one of the co-founders of Neofibers. It's a fashion tech, also very new. Our proposal is try to identify these fibers of the exotic trees of the Amazon, for the Peruvian Amazon, and transform into new fabrics and yarns and garments for fashion industry. We believe in that transformation and connect with the value for the Amazon.
Thank you. François.
Hello, my name is François. I'm the co-founder of a sneaker brand called Veja. And basically 20 years ago with my best friend Sebastian, we asked ourselves how to do the most sustainable sneaker, like the sneaker that would respect the environment and the people. And as there was no Future Fabrics at the time, we decided to travel to Brazil and to find by ourselves. And in the end, we got involved into agriculture.
Thank you very much, Francois. And last but not least, Hendrik is joining us by the wonder of modern technology. So, Hendrik, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Hendrik Buermann. I'm coming actually to you from Tanzania. I'm sitting in Dar es Salaam at the moment. I'm working for GIZ, a German government-owned enterprise that works in development cooperation. And I've been here in Tanzania now for 7 years, and for 6 out of those 7 years, we've been implementing an organic cotton program funded by the Laudes Foundation, which made the country the largest producer of organic cotton in Africa and the 5th largest in the world. In our project, we have now more than 60,000 smallholder farmers organic certified. And since this season, actually 23,000 of them also regenerative. Okay.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop there and acknowledge that we are probably not the most diverse panel that you've ever seen. We acknowledge that. More work to do next time to ensure that we focus on that. So I'm going to call that out before we go any further. So my first question is to Philippe. I'm interested in hearing more about regenerative farming. And I think that's something that we certainly see in food and in textiles. What appeals to you and your suppliers about regenerative farming specifically?
I mean, I think we don't have the time context to explain what regen ag is in detail, but I think the core of the issue is that our agricultural system right now is broken. It's not serving farmers. Farmers don't want to go into farming anymore. We have a huge age issue in farming right now. It's not serving our planet. It's 24% of all greenhouse gas emissions coming from agriculture. It's the main driver for biodiversity loss. And it's also not serving our own health, because if we're not looking at fashion but at food, then most of the food that we're eating nowadays is not nutritious anymore, and it's actually making us sick. So the only people that are really benefiting from it is some large corporations, and it's the agrochemical industry. And I think what I love about regenerative agriculture is that it has the potential of turning one of the biggest issues into one of the biggest solutions, because we can actually reverse climate change if we work with nature and we use the potential of plants to, for example, take carbon from the atmosphere and store it in the soil. And it also tackles the issue at the root, because the root and the core issue that I'm seeing is that farmers are reduced to the one produce that they're producing, and they're only getting paid for the yield. And since farmers are businessmen, that means that they're focusing on maximizing that yield at all costs. And that leads to all of these negative ecosystem services. In regenerative agriculture, we look at farms as holistic ecosystems and farmers as stewards of those ecosystems. And we just, as climate farmers, we just enable these farmers to understand their local ecosystem the best, to work with it, and to actually make it thrive, and to increase the life-holding capacity of that place. Whereas in normal agriculture, we usually work with killing things a lot more than with growing things.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to consider that nearly 2 billion people globally are malnourished or short of food. Yet we have a growing problem. The WHO estimate that approximately a third of the global population are now clinically overweight. So there's this big challenge with poor distribution, not necessarily lack of productivity, but yet you're right, we continue to reward farmers purely for that productivity. But in terms of rewarding farmers, so for your farmers, how are they being rewarded for this arguably public good that they're doing? Is it in carbon markets? How is that? How are they being rewarded?
I think that's exactly the problem. They're not.
Right.
So in the right now, the system is, for me, I love working with these farmers because they're all doing what they're doing because they believe in it and they love it and they care for their land. But they're not getting any financial rewards right now for what they're doing. Carbon credits is one of the tools in the toolbox that we are working with, especially because we're doing this since 2019. And back then, there was no hype on Regen Ag yet. There was no Kiss the Ground movie yet. So no one was speaking about it. But there was a possibility of paying farmers for this. What farms can realistically sequester is 1 to 2 tons per hectare. And that we can sell for 50 euros. So it's between 50 and 100 euros per hectare, which is not nothing, but it's also not financing the transition. What we would need is to actually pay for the range of ecosystem services. We would have to start paying farmers for building biodiversity and not just talk about it. Problem is, no one wants to pay for it. I have not found a single company so far that is willing to pay farmers for building biodiversity. Same thing with saltwater storage capacity. Here in Europe, we have a lot of floods and we have a lot of droughts. Both of these are happening because our soils are so depleted due to agricultural system that they're not able to soak up water when it rains, and that means they can also not release it when it's a drought. So we had, for example, 3 weeks ago, we had in Germany floodings again in southern Germany. We had 2 billion euros in damages. With that money, I could have financed the transition of all of Germany's farmers to regenerative agriculture. So what we are trying to do right now is to bring all these different systems players together in order to make solutions that actually reward farmers for ecosystem services. And if we would do that, we would actually easily scale from the destructive conventional system towards a regenerative system. But unfortunately, we're still far away from that reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's encouraging that certainly our organisation are increasingly being approached by financial institutions who talk about food and agriculture being the next gas and oil. And I think if you're the eagle-eyed amongst you have noticed the premiere of the film, The Grab, and I think this is very much feels to me like the beginning of that conversation of who does that system serve. So I'm really excited that we're having conversations with big finance about where the risk is in food and agriculture. Clearly, they don't want risks for their shareholders, so maybe we'll see some reward there. But I'm going to ask you one more question before I move on. Slightly controversial question about regen, and I have to ask this because I'm from the Sword Association, but I think according to a report last year by the World Benchmarking Alliance, of the many companies surveyed making regenerative claims, only 4% disclosed how they're actually any data on how they're minimizing agrochemical usage like pesticides. So how do we reassure consumers of regenerative products that these farmers, these products are truly addressing these big problems that you've called out?
Perfect question. So that's actually the big issue. So we have a massive, with the hype on Region Ag, we see a very big issue of greenwashing essentially, because there's no verification out there yet. Yeah. And so with climate farmers, we actually, over the last 2 years, we have been working with several of the leading soil health institutes, such as Wageningen, Fiebel, SAIF, ETH Zurich, and with our farmer community. And we're right now actually in the process of bringing out a regenerative agriculture verification. And I think the core issue here is it needs to be outcome-based. Because farmers don't like the current verification process, including the organic verification, because it's just someone coming to their farm with a checklist and trying to tell them what to do. But farmers know themselves best what they should do in their ecosystem and what makes it thrive. So what we should do is we should just measure what is happening on that farm, and then we should reward these farmers for what is going on in the farm and for the positive things that they're supplying for all of us. And this is, I think, the way how we can get out of the system. So if any company claims to source regen, you should always ask, where's the proof? How can you show me that what you call regenerative is actually regenerative? If you don't, then it's just a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, we have an expression at the Sword Association that all organic farmers are regenerative, but not all regenerative farmers are organic. So
and not all organic are regenerative. I strongly disagree there. I think there's a lot of organic farmers that are very much destroying their local ecosystem.
Interesting.
I don't agree on that.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to move on to you, Eddie. You've been looking at different frameworks. For example, Textile Exchange's regenerative agricultural outcome framework. How does that differ from regenerative organic, which you're also experiencing? And what are your experiences around the suitability of the different approaches for your farmers and your customers?
Philippe mentioned something very interesting, because in our case, we work with Amazonian communities, indigenous communities in the Amazon. And it's very interesting because when we start this project, obviously we bring all this concept about around regenerative agriculture, right? But what we discover is it's similar. Like all of these communities are doing this like regenerative practices since centuries ago, right? It's maybe for us it's really new concept, but for them it's like the way they produce their food, their fibers, the way they protect their ecosystem around that. You mentioned about the whole this ecosystem services, right? Well, it's for us it's new, but for them it's like the usual practice they have. Well, we start this project with two standards, because it's important to try to use a standard to measure our work. In this case, we start with ROC, with ROC standard. We were one of the pioneers in this project with our cotton in the Amazon, and after that we decided to improve our standard with another standard like Regenerative. But right now, we are in the process to try to identify another frameworks like textile exchange, for example, and other ones, because it's really new concept. And everybody's trying to develop a new focus, for example. And in this process, we try to incorporate all these standards and try to define a standard for new fibers in this case, because we work with two types of fibers, right? One of them, obviously, is the cotton, regenerative cotton, certified cotton, but also with exotic fibers, who is totally new, because it's like we identify with the investigation, in this case, of Sumiko Hong. Sumiko Hong is one of our co-founders. She's like the star, the creative director of this, and she researched for more than 10 years to identify these exotic trees in the Amazon with high potential for fashion. And yeah, you can imagine 10 years of investigation, and after 10 years, try to put in place all these ideas in this Neofibers company. And of course, we try to blend all these fibers and try to certify these new fibers and transform into fabrics and garments and a concept around that, because we believe that it's totally possible. Well, the way we conceptualize the regenerative business model is not only in the way of recover the soil, but also try to give new opportunities for the communities around that in the Amazon. It's very interesting how not all the standards recover that information or that impact of the business models.
Interesting. And very quickly, I've certainly in the organic world, I'm aware that very often farmers never see the end product. They never see the final fruits of their labours. So do you make efforts to engage your producers with the end product? And do they have direct experience? And is there any benefit for Neofibers from farmers seeing what they're actually producing?
Totally, because the sensation of the farmers when they met another people from different part of the world, and they explain how their fibers transform into final product and how many jobs generates across the value chains, across the globe. They feel proud about it. And it's so relevant because you mentioned that the aging problem in the farmer sector, because one of the symptoms of this is because they took all this picture and sent to their family to try to explain how important is their work, because maybe their son or daughter is outside in the city because they left the field, right? For us, it's so relevant because we need to keep all these families with the best opportunities, with a better income, with a fair trade in general. We are already certified with this kind of standards, to try to keep them all in the Amazon, try to steward all this ecosystem, right?
Brilliant, thank you. I'm gonna move over to you, Ed, now, and I'll come to you in just a moment, François. So please bear with us. And of course, we haven't forgotten about you, Hendrik. I'm interested in hearing a bit more about data collection, because I guess I'm hearing about two approaches really to sustainability. One, you can rely on third-party accreditation, but of course there are other approaches where businesses feel that actually ground-proofing, I think is the expression you use, is really important. So how are you using this to leverage regenerative approaches in your supply chains, this gathering and collecting data?
Yeah, so we focus on data in, I guess, for two people. There's like the brand and there's the farmer. So firstly, we have certification. We use Regenerative, but I think as we've talked about previously, we really see this as a baseline. And I think, Eddie, as you were mentioning, like looking at outcomes also is really what we want to push towards. So when we work with a brand, it's really about having radical transparency, which is quite frightening for us. So it's pretty much collecting everything that we can and supporting a farmer to be like, okay, we will help you get towards an outcome, but we need to actually show to a brand, a line will be going like this. It goes up, it goes down, it goes forward, it goes back, but the direction of travel is what's important. So we spend a lot of time educating brands as to this is an outcome you want to achieve. So we want to raise farmer livelihoods, we want to restore biodiversity, and we want to reduce off-farm inputs. But we believe that doesn't happen overnight, and depending on the community you work with, one community will just be amazing. They'll shift immediately pesticide-free, chemical-free, and they'll basically already be organic. There'll be another community that really struggles, for example, with a specific pest to find a bio-based solution locally. So I think firstly, having that data to explain that narrative, that the farmer's not useless. The farmer's trying incredibly hard, and the brand can therefore understand and build a narrative that they can explain to their customer. I think on the other side, the kind of area where data really comes in is giving that bespoke support. So when you work with every community, India is as big as Europe. So you imagine us growing in the UK versus growing in Holland versus growing in Italy. You've got completely different climate, completely different soil, completely different crops that you grow. So having the concept that you just follow the same practices and magically you're a profitable farm, I think is sometimes potentially naive. So I think this is where we really like the concept of unlocking data, so we can use smartphones firstly, we can leverage internet connectivity to give bespoke support so that farmer doesn't just have 3 training days a year, they have continuous live contact with our team. So we've built an application called CoFarm that is basically a farmer diary and farmer support app. So you can track your expenses, you can reach out to us using local languages in like video, text, image, all these sort of things. So someone can be like, oh, I've taken a picture of this insect, I'm not sure what it is. Our team can immediately reach out and be like, that's a beneficial insect. Don't go grab the pesticide that's actually helping, that's showing that there's a change happening. But we think that need for kind of continuous communication is really built from, firstly, you need data, then you need a method of communication, and then you need to be able to kind of focus on what are the right goals we're pushing towards.
Yeah, doing the right thing can so often be knowledge intensive and doesn't have to be chemical intensive. So I may come back to you on the point. My second question, you've answered really well already. So conscious of time, I'm going to go to François and ask you, François. We talk about supporting farmers. We've deep dived into supply chain integrity and the organic movement, and I think when we do, we're reminded the relationships really matter in supply chains. And as I'm a brand, I'm aware that your brand, for you, the human and emotional connections are really important. So when you show up for farmers, particularly in difficult times, this matters, doesn't it?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, certifications are very important. We at Veja we only work since day one with certified products because it gives trust to the people we are talking to. But we know that people will never buy a shoe because it's organic. This is also something we learned, and I'd say that farmers will not transition to organic farming if 2 things are not okay. First, the money. They need to be well paid. And this answers, I think, a lot to what you said. And in our case, we are not following the price of the market, not even like the premium organic. No, we are following a price that respects the needs of the people. So today, it's 4 times the price of the fiber that we pay in Brazil, because this is the price that was that was calculated by the farmers and by the NGOs that help the farmers. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, yes, is emotional or has to do with what you said, the pride, and what does it mean? It means that the farmers they feel engaged in a process that is local with their neighbors, with their friends, with the certification body that in Brazil is something that is collective, but also with us, with the brands. And it's not with me only, but with my team, the sourcing team that visits them, that works with them, and of course that the day we started launching the brand Veja in Brazil, it was crazy because suddenly the product appeared in their lives. You know, they could see it on TV, and they could relate, and they were even more proud to own their pairs because they own pairs, and we have like competitions when they are more productive. They can have free pairs for the family and things like that. So I think the emotional part, the friendship part, is very important because, you know, in the end, as I said, we arrived in Brazil and we started looking for farmers, for products, for fibers, and in the end, we made friends. We discovered people that we want to hang out with, that we want to live with. So I think this was a bit a surprise to us. And I think it's as important for them that it is important for us as a brand to be able to live that adventure, because it is not easy to convert to organic agriculture, and but it's a journey, and there are like some highs and lows, and to respond exactly your question, it's because before we prepared this talk, and I told the group an anecdote that one year in Brazil there was a very big drought, and so cotton production was almost nothing. So then I said to my team, okay, maybe this year I'm gonna skip the visit to the cotton farmers. And once the farmers knew I would cancel the visit, they said, no. Even if we didn't produce, it's not about that. Come and visit us, and we talk, and we because each year we have meetings where farmers tell how the year was, and we as a company we also say, okay, like we had some sales growing up or things like that, and that means that the relationship is not only about like commercial, it is about sharing a project together. So yeah, that's for us it's very important, and it's what also makes us get up in the morning, you know. We don't go up in the morning just to be certified organic, I think. But if you have something that is a bit bigger.
Sure, fantastic. Right, I'm going to pass over to Hendrik now. Hendrik, organic is really at the core of what you do as a project. And I know, although I'm sensing that Philippe and I may not agree on this, I go back to that belief that the best organic farmers are regen and the best regen farmers are organic. But you know, when we've got such a long track record in organic and we've earned consumer trust through tough regulation, why do you think we're seeing so much energy around regenerative agriculture? And what are the risks for having that separation or distinction between organic and regen?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we have to understand, first of all, I think the difference between agriculture in Europe or in the West or in a smallholder farming context. I think there's a huge difference. In general, I mean, organic, as we know, basically just certifies the absence of chemical, pesticides, fertilizer, GMO. That's it. The question is, what do you teach as organic and what do you see as true organic? And sometimes, and many people hate me for that, I say, well, organic, regenerative, agroecology, don't we just mean the same with it? It's a bit provocative, and yeah, I can see people. Obviously, we need to look into the details of it. Yeah, but I think it's clear organic, just as a certification, can be fully unsustainable, large-scale industrialized agriculture with monocropping and so on and so forth. But again, in our smallholder farming context here, it's different. On the one hand, it's a certification scheme that opens up market opportunities and gives premium payments to farmers. That's one thing. But I think the other way is to see it is that basically, at least in my perspective, for subsistence smallholder farmer here, it's the only way to do agriculture now and in the future. In the cotton growing areas here in Tanzania, and we all know cotton growing areas are semi-arid regions, they are the hardest hit by climate change. And, you know, smallholders need to find a way how they can practice agriculture in a way that secures them economically as well. And they don't have, at least in our context, they don't have the means to invest into very expensive inputs such as chemicals that are procured from abroad. And they also know that they have to invest into the quality of their soil, because ultimately that's your future yields, and into ecosystem services in general. I mean, they might not understand the word ecosystem services, and in Kiswahili there's not even a word for climate change, but actually they realize what's going on around them, and they know that it's a business case for them as well. So in that case, what we did under organic agriculture all those years actually means looking into practices as well. And these practices you find again in a lot of regenerative certification schemes as well. So it's not just leaving away chemicals, it's really how can I practice a sustainable way of agriculture. if we now look at regenerative certification, and there's a lot of different certification schemes coming up, but they're very hard to compare often, and they're very like place-based specific. I mean, maybe just an example. Regen Agri looks at cover cropping. I think ROC also looks at cover cropping. Cover cropping is definitely a very good practice to do. But in the case of our organic or our regenerative, even cotton farmers, it's dry when cotton is being harvested. And after that, to grow a cover crop is challenging if you don't have irrigation. So it's a bit looking really at the specifics of now what a regenerative certification scheme actually wants to certify. I think ROC requires annual lab tests of soils. For us, with 60,000 smallholder farmers that farm maybe around 2 to 3 acres, that's really impossible. So I think we definitely support the transition to truly regenerative agriculture, be it now organic certified, regenerative certified. Again, that's a market thing. I think we really need to look into practices, but we also need to be very careful that with regenerative certification schemes, we're not excluding anyone.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and I think we would acknowledge that the organic movement is imperfect and it cannot stand still, and there is work to do. And I'm certainly reminded by what you say that you can't create a one-size-fits-all. And I guess in some respects, organic has chosen not to be too prescriptive about things like cover cropping. That's a really good example, in the hope that we have a sort of a consistent, recognised system that nets out better than its industrial, chemical-reliant, comparator. But are there any specific areas, very quickly, that you think organic needs to evolve?
Yeah, I mean, again, if I talk about organic, I can also talk about regenerative, but I think in general, the focus goes more to deforestation, but loss of biodiversity, things like that. And I think we need to start also looking a little bit more just beyond the field of a farmer. I'm always saying a farmer can practice perfect organic or regenerative agriculture, but when the biodiversity is lost around him or her, then it has a profound impact on the farming system itself. Mm-hmm. So basically, if in our context here, we see a lot of the communities cutting down trees, mainly for firewood. Tanzania has deforestation rates that are almost at par with Brazil. So now when those trees are gone, the birds are gone. Then who's going to eat the pest from the cotton? And we had the example of the water holding capacity of soil. This goes the same. If there's a hill and the trees are gone, then the next rain will bring floods. So I think we need to see farming more in the context of a landscape as well. And a landscape is a geographical landscape, an ecosystem, but it's also an economic landscape. And I think we need to tackle issues at all levels. And this is where now, with the support of Laudes Foundation, we're building something we call a regenerative production landscape collaborative. Basically, the idea that stakeholders in a landscape, not only the farmers, but also communities, businesses, local government, everyone works on a kind of common vision of an agricultural production system. And we're trying to get away from this single farmer, single commodity certification scheme that actually is quite narrow-minded, and I think especially here in a smallholder context, quite difficult to achieve sometimes, and create more like a sustainable landscape governed by all stakeholders that then can function as a sourcing destination for all types of businesses and all types of supply chains. And I think this is really, at least in our context, the way how we can make businesses and other actors part of solving the issues that we have here, and not only looking at farmers and always saying the farmer needs to do this, the farmer needs to do that.
Thank you very much, Hendrik. I'm going to move now very quickly. We promised the audience we would make sort of 5 or 10 minutes for questions. So please do tell us who you are, where you're from before you ask a question. I'm going to start with the gentleman who's already ready to go in the front there.
Thank you very much, Lee. I'm ready to go. I'm Christopher Stokes from the Global Organic Textile Standard. And I was really keen, Lee, to back you up on understanding what organic is compared to regenerative. And I love what you said, obviously, Philippe, really good. And yeah, Hendrik, you're absolutely right, and GIZ is doing great stuff. But the question, Philippe, to you is, regenerative is reliant on agrochemicals and fertilizers. Unless the yes, it is reliant on. Organic definitely delivers the outcomes, environment and biodiversity, well demonstrated, clearly referenced. Now, although one can pick holes in organic, and Lee, your facilitators already started picking holes, I think we need to be a bit more clear that regenerative is greenwash, because you are allowing the use of agrochemicals, you are allowing the use of fertilizers, and you do allow GM and GE. I think it's really important that we get that clear, because transparency is at the heart of stopping greenwash. And I don't think you're being entirely honest with your audience when you're telling them that chemicals are not used. Not true. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Can I just
do you want
quickly jump
who
in?
wants to come back on that?
I mean, 1% of global textiles are organic. You've been trying to scale for 20 years, so I'd say, like, you know, your time has happened. There's a lot of dogma that's attached. It's quite funny. This panel's about regenerative, and we have GOTS and the Soil Association jumping back and feeling threatened.
I have to say I'm quite shocked that we have a moderator that's biased and actually criticizing what the topic is on stage. I think that's quite a no-go in my opinion, but it's okay. Let's talk about the facts. The organic movement is in principle started with a great mindset, and we work with a lot of organic organizations together. But from a farmer point of view, it has failed. Farmers hate the organic verification. They hate it when someone comes to their farm and tells them what to do. And many of the farmers that we are supporting in the transition have lost their organic verification because they started on the regenerative journey. Because what they did that actually works in their context and healed their ecosystem was not in line with the tick list. Because the biggest problem is it's practice-based. And as Hendrik perfectly said, practice-based does not work. Nature is complex. What works in one ecosystem doesn't work in another ecosystem. So what we need to do is we need to measure outcomes. We need to see what works in what context. And what you call it, I don't care. Call it regenerative, call it organic, but reward farmers for ecosystem services which you measure with data. If you don't have the data to show for it, don't call it regenerative, don't call it good. Measure data, see data, pay for data, and that's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Do we have any other questions? Question over here. Yeah. Do we have a mic?
So I'm Lucille. I'm working in a sourcing agency in Paris, and I'm building currently a platform for helping fashion actors to implement a regenerative solution in the supply chain. So thank you for today. It was really interesting. Earlier, Philippe, you said that farmers are not rewarded and doesn't have any financial things, and they're doing that because they're just convinced by regenerative system. You have Caring and Conservation International that doing the regenerative fund for nature, and they building with farmers some things and doing investment on the ground. First question, do you work with them? Do you collaborate with them? And second question, do you think that this big investment from giants is a good idea, or is it just greenwashing? Thank you.
I don't think I'm the right person to ask questions in the fashion context. So as I said, I think everything is very context specific. And as Hendrik also pointed out, the context that I'm operating in is the European context. So the challenge that I'm having is I want to transition the European agri-food system towards a regenerative system. So I think I have a very good understanding of what goes wrong in Europe, and policy and everything is another whole topic to go into. But I don't know what's going on outside of Europe, because the context, like for example, where Hendrik is working or where you are working, is very different. Same thing for fashion. Fashion is not playing a large role in Europe. There's a little bit of cotton in Spain and Greece, and there's a little bit of fiber production, but we are mostly working with agri-food companies right now, and mostly working directly with farmer cooperatives, insurances, banks, and all these other actors. I have had some conversations at the Global Fashion Summit with Kering. The person that I spoke with seemed very knowledgeable, seemed very much wanting to do the right thing, but I'm not the right person to give a statement on if what they're doing is good or not.
Anybody else want to come in on that? No? Should we take another question from the audience? Any others? No? Question over here. Can we get a mic over there?
No, maybe I just have a little comment to do on the regenerative organic thing, and it's just that it's so early. It's a new movement, and that we embrace, of course. And I think it's too early to come and criticize, and maybe it's even too early to have like labels. As you said, we call it whatever. But if we feel we're doing the right thing, I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll take the question from lady with the mic.
Yes. Hi. You are talking about data and all that thing, and I'm just wondering about how do you measure biodiversity, into what granularity would you go, or like how do you do that?
The difficulty of measuring. Go on.
No, I guess it's quite easy nowadays. There's an amazing company in the UK, for example, which is called Nature Metrics, and they're using a tool which is called eDNA, so they can find traces of any tiny insect or being which has been there, which has left some traces behind. And then this is relatively expensive. It costs like 5,000 to 10,000 euros per farm. And as I said, the problem with biodiversity, and it's one that frustrates me a lot, is that people like to talk about it, but nobody likes to pay for it. And this is the big problem that we're having. Biodiversity is such a crucial thing, and our agriculture, organic or conventional, is killing biodiversity right now. And we are not actually paying any attention to it, and we're not actually willing to pay farmers who are building and increasing biodiversity. Such as, for example, most indigenous people, almost all indigenous farmers would be building biodiversity, just because it makes sense. In our system, we're currently not doing that, and we're not willing to pay farmers for biodiversity. We can measure it. I can't pay farmers for it right now, but we can definitely measure it.
Any other questions? We'll take one more question from the back.
So my name's Lena, and I'm an integrated design student from New Zealand. Thank you for opening up this conversation. How do you keep up with the rate of change in agricultural ecosystems and build systems farmers can trust will provide stability when the factors you are dealing with are so unreliable and changing as climate change?
Really great question. Who's feeling brave enough to
I can
tackle?
start. I mean,
Ed,
I think
please.
context specificness, which is where I think regenerative is so exciting. If you focus on outcomes versus practices, it allows you to flex depending on the community. I think, as I was mentioning earlier, so something that might be the best approach in one community might be completely counterintuitive to another. So I think that's firstly what we try to do. So we work across 3 different states, and the outcomes we're focusing on and the actual practices that we suggest are different for each community. And those are very specifically on the financial availability, the kind of human-animal conflict, for example, the amount of rain, the quality of the soil, the crops that they want to grow other than cotton. So we really try to focus on building what we call a future-proofed approach, so making sure that we think 5-10 years forward and working back from there. And that's how we achieve our year 1 with a community to a year 10. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're facing obviously some problems in the Amazon where we are source of rubber, a lot of deforestation, especially the last 10 years. And many things that we tried to do to prevent. First thing is to valorize more the rubber. So if people can make more money with rubber than with cattle, then they will not enter the cattle, so they will not deforest. Second, talk to the people, so hire more people to go to be on the ground, to be supportive, because these people are not bad people. They're not doing it because they're evil. They're doing it because they need the money, because they want to put their kids in university one day. And third, we are also like doing some radio spots, some really like massive information campaigns, especially right now when the fire season starts in Brazil, so that to remind the people to respect the deal, so that they will get the bonification, because Veja is paying bonification to the rubber tappers that do not deforest. And so yeah, we are. We need to fight together for this climate but each place is a different situation. So
Yeah.
that's
Thank you
an example in the rubber.
I want to add something.
Please.
In our case, we are in this process, right? Because you mentioned different regions, different problems. In this case, we work with indigenous communities in the Amazon. They have a lot of issues, a lot of problems, real problems in the daily basis, right? But we try to offer a new option, right? More sustainable in this case, fair trade, right? Well paid. Try to generate a better income for the families. But it's another option that they actually have, right? In this case, we try to not only transform their ancestral practices into like new practices aligned with the today's standards like organic, regenerative, or another one in the coming years, I don't know. But if we connect these communities with these fibers, with this global market, it would be great because this is another option, right? Well, we try a best option for a sustainable fashion, not a regular fashion because they have a lot of issues. But it's so important try to be this bridge between these communities, this problem, this ecosystem. Try to fight against the deforestation, and try to connect with another way to make fashion. This is our proposition in this case, right?
Fantastic. So, wow, we've run out of time already, and an extremely, I think, quite lively debate. And I think, and we've clearly got some adjustments to panels to do, I think, in more way than one. And I think, just from a couple of final thoughts before we close, is that I think, we've got lots of different approaches out there. We've got some really big problems, as I pointed out from the beginning, and I think these kind of debates, if one thing is evident, whether you believe that it's never right to use agrochemicals, or whether you think that there is a kind of a lack of flexibility in some of those codified systems, that it isn't working for your context, I think all of this can coexist. And I think what I personally, as someone who's involved in organic, and yes, I'm going to cheerlead a bit for that, for 25 years, is really that we have got room for all of these approaches. We have got room for all these things to work together. There's no way that we will solve the big problems that we're trying to solve by giving the public the option of one or the other. So I think the outgoing head of Organic Denmark once said to me, in organic we do need to be woke to the advent of regen and not provoked by it, and we do need to see how we can all work together in harmony. So I think on that note, I'm just going to thank all of our panelists for joining us this afternoon, and of course thank you, the audience, for making the time. And of course thank Future Fabrics for hosting the event and inviting us all to join them this afternoon. So do stick around for the next session, which will be entitled Reality Check: How to Make Circular Systems Succeed, which I believe is starting in about 20 minutes. So thank you all once again to our panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Told you.
Please leave your headsets behind when you finish with them. If you just leave them behind on the benches there, that will be fine. Now, to the right of the stage, over in the Knowledge Hub,